Winston Churchill once said that the inherent vice of capitalism is that it's the uneven distribution of blessings. But the inherent vice of communism is that it's the even distribution of misery. So, what does the Torah believe in? Does it believe in capitalism or does it believe in communism? So obviously the Torah believes in a capitalistic market, a free enterprise. However, the Torah believes in capitalism with compassion. And this week's Torah talks about all the compassionate laws to make sure that the poor man in your midst is provided for, starting with the sabbatical year when everyone is equal. All of the land is not worked. You must leave the land fallow, and the poor man can go and take whatever he needs. In addition to that, all debts are relinquished in the 7th year, and all debts are wiped out. And also, after 7 years, the slave goes free. And so there are many laws and provisions to make sure that, yes, while we have a capitalistic market, there's compassion and a conscience to care about those less fortunate. But one law says the following in this week's parsha: if your brother becomes weak or impoverished in your midst, umata yado, his hand begins to falter with you, amongst you, vechzaktaba, you should strengthen him. So our rabbis say, what kind of a mitzvah is this? That if your brother becomes impoverished, you should strengthen him. So Rashi quotes the Talmud that when a donkey is overburdened and the donkey starts to collapse, one person can put up his hands and stabilize the donkey that it shouldn't collapse. But once the donkey collapses with its weight on the floor, it takes 5 people to lift the person back up. And therefore what the Torah is telling us is don't wait for the man to fall into bankruptcy and then you have to schlep him out. Don't wait until they foreclose on his house. Don't wait until it's too late. Because then it'll take 5 times as much effort and investment to rehabilitate that person. The wise way to do it is what they call preventive medicine, which means you see what's happening, you see this man is starting to shake, he's starting to falter, he's having a hard time, and with a little bit of support, with a little bit of strengthening, reinforcement, you could save him from collapsing and having to go through the humiliation of having become impoverished and then have to rehabilitate the person once again. I once heard a story, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, but it brings out the point, that there was a guy who was walking in a park one day, and he looked very distraught, very worried. And there was an old man sitting on the bench, and he said, "Young man, what's the matter? Come tell me what the problem is." So he saw it was a nice, caring old man. He sat down next to him. He says, I'm going through a hard time in business. I don't know what to do. My business is really going bad. He says, I don't have money to invest, to be able to get more merchandise, whatever it is, to do more deals. The man says, I'm an elderly man, I'm very wealthy. Nothing will give me more pleasure than to help out a nice young man. Takes out his checkbook. He says, what's your name? He tells him his name. He writes out a check for $100,000. He says, this is a loan. If you're able, interest-free. If you're able to pay it back, fine. If not, don't worry about it. It's a gift. The man was so excited. He says, how am I going to find you to pay you back? He says, I sit on this bench every day in the afternoon for a few hours. You could always find me in the park. So he goes off. He's reinvigorated. He has $100,000. So he starts placing orders and things. He knows he has money. And things start moving. But he puts the check in his drawer because he figures I always have a check. If I need to turn to it, I got backup. But with the newfound confidence and strength, he starts turning over business and selling and buying, and his business takes off. And 6-9 months later, he says, what, things are good. I don't even have to deposit the check. So he goes back to the park to look for the old man to give back his check. And he comes back to the park and he sees the old man. And there's a woman sitting next to him. He comes over, he says, how are you, Mr. So-and-so? I want to tell you that $100,000 you gave me, it really changed my life. I didn't even have to deposit it. It just gave me confidence and strength and everything. And the woman says, excuse me, what are you talking about? He says, well, you weren't here last time when I came here. He helped me and this and that. And then the woman says, I'm sorry, but I'm his nurse. I'm his aide. Unfortunately, Mr. So-and-so has dementia. He's not in his right mind. He lives on Social Security. He doesn't have $100,000 in his bank account, that check is worthless. But meanwhile, that turned around his life. And the point is that sometimes a good word, the first thing is education. When you educate children, then you put them on a strong path. And not just financial path, but when you educate them in all areas of life, so they shouldn't turn to drugs, they shouldn't turn to alcohol. We spend so much money on opioid problems, right? And we spend, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars trying to solve the opioid problem. The best way to solve the problem is to teach kids to live healthily in the first place. They shouldn't turn to these things, because if you just strengthen the child when he's young, you'll avoid so many problems later down the road. But when we see somebody who's going through a difficult time, a smile, a lending hand, a little reassurance, a little encouragement, a little bit of support can go a long way. And therefore what the Torah is telling us is have vision and see what the problems may occur and practice preventive medicine.